Welcome back to Media7, where I'm talking about the internet and privacy with lawyer Rick Shearer, marketer Michael Carney and journalist Deborah Hill-Cohen. Rick, one use that we see the media make of social media, journalists seem to have no compunction, editors have no compunction about grabbing pictures of some kid's Bebo site. You know, if the kid's disappeared, it appears it's fair game. What do you make of that?
Yeah, well, I mean, the interesting thing is that there's this conception growing up that anything put on the internet is effectively free for all. That's absolutely not the case, but people are struggling with, well, how do we control that? So in the case of images, pictures and so on, they belong absolutely to the person who puts them up there, and no one else can use them unless for the purpose that they were put up. So copyright law will sit alongside privacy law. Is
it likely to be enforced, though? Because copyright's meaningless unless it's asserted, isn't it?
It is becoming more easy to enforce it, and we're going through this transition in law at the moment in New Zealand and elsewhere about how do we avoid the expense of going to court to restrain these sorts of very ephemeral infringements in a different sort of environment. So it's a paradigmatic change, really it is.
We've also seen Bill Ralston recently grumping online about having his tweets on Twitter quoted by a certain gossip columnist. Does he have a leg to stand on there?
Unless Bill can claim that they were so unique and so important that they really were copyrightable, then no. I mean, there's obviously an implied licence when you give something to Twitter that it's available to the world. Privacy goes out the window there. Michael, copyright possibly.
Michael, another tricky question that you highlighted and Jose covered in that most amusing item is Section 56, because family material used to be very much family material, and it could really only be handed around by hand. Now everyone's got their pictures on Facebook. I can't see how the law is going to make that private-public dividing line. Yeah. How will they handle it?
Well, I suspect it is a genie that simply can't be put back into the bottle. I mean, you'd have to say, and I think Jose made the point rather well, that when you are taking photos and then sharing them with your friends in an analogue world, you know, that's fine and dandy, and it only gets a certain distance from you before it fails to be communicated any further. But online, you know, once it's posted, it's up and available for everyone, and there's nothing much that either legislation nor indeed technology can do unless the people operating the sites where you post these things, i.e. Facebook and its ilk, make a sudden and dramatic change, and I really can't see that happening.
But that's really is kind of a deeper change, is that I think Facebook has kind of made us one big family. I mean, I'm a Facebook slut or a shameless oversharer on Facebook, and I've got to know people, some of whom I probably rather regret getting to know, but I haven't had any casual sex off Facebook, which is one of the things that they said that it was. But I have met people, not necessarily even met them in the real world, in a meaningful way that you don't normally meet people. And in some ways, I think that you don't want to shut that all down, because it's almost like the community of across the teacups or talking over the hedge. It has really changed the way that we interact with people and can share. In a good way.
It's kind of redefined the idea of friend, though, hasn't it? Because, I mean, if we shared something with our friends, that usually meant with a dozen people. Now, if you share something with your friends on Facebook, it's hundreds of people. And I think that's changed the whole territory.
You say that like it's a bad thing.
Well, no, not necessarily. Okay, have you ever friended someone in pursuit of a story?
No, but I'm not enough of a Gina hard-faced bitch, but maybe back in the day when I probably would think this was just a handy thing. And I do think that there sort of seems to be a namby-pamby attitude about journalists using stuff on Facebook. I'd say, well, sure, just go and use it all. It's all, people choose to put it out there. I mean, you have to be thick not to know that, you're putting your stuff out there. And I wouldn't put any pictures of my children on Facebook until I kind of did, but I think so. So I think that in that sense, people should feel free to put it out there, and if it turns up in a news story, tough. Except for the distinction I'd make is with minors, and I think young people and kids, it's like they don't know what they're doing, so they're not making an informed decision.
Michael, you described as frightening the proposal in the Law Commission's review that commercial companies that hold information on us should be prepared to show us what information they've got and tell us how they're tracking us. Why is that so frightening?
Basically frightening because it's increasingly unworkable in any kind of sense. I mean, you'd need to effectively have a pop-up every time we gathered that you were interested in fishing, say. saying, Russell, we know you're interested in fishing. Would you like us to hold on to that information or delete it? We weren't planning to share it with anybody, but we were planning to show you some fishing tackle that you might be interested in.
I can see how that could get annoying.
Yeah.
But I mean, that is the underlying principle of the Privacy Act, isn't it? That we can see what information's being held on us. Are you saying that it's impractical to do that across the wider internet?
Well, it's impractical to do it in the sense that it was being debated within the discussion document, which is to say on a case-by-case, every time basis. I mean, it may well be, and is in fact possible for you to make inquiries as to what information is being held on you, but doing it any other way is simply not going to happen. And I think, as Deborah makes the point, really, do we have old-fashioned, quaint notions of privacy that simply aren't realistic in today's environment?
Rick, I get the impression just briefly that we're having this conversation a wee bit late because the submission's closed this week. This has crept up on everyone, hasn't it?
It has crept up, and I think the Law Commission perhaps might have promoted the discussion into the areas in which we're talking, social networking and other areas, Facebook, for example.
They were too busy with booze.
But unfortunately, that's not the case.
Well, we'll put a link on the Media7 blog, but we do have to conclude this discussion now. As I said, submissions to the review close this week. And now, Jose Barbosa is back again, and he finds media treasure in an unlikely place.
This week, we're coming to you from Foxton. Have you had a good laugh? I bet you have. Just because you've got 3G coverage and a couple of sushi bars. Well, the thing about small towns is that they quite often contain hidden gems. And if you come with me now, I'll show you one.
This is the Foxton Audiovisual Museum. And I'm not joking when I say it houses examples of just about every piece of equipment used to broadcast or receive sound or vision over the past 100 years. This is Guy. He fixes up stuff that gets donated to the museum and has probably forgotten more about electronics than you've had warm meals.
That one here, it has various odd capacitors inside which are fairly poisonous, and they're not allowed to be handled by anybody.
What's the poisons inside?
I can't give you the technical name, but they call it PCB.
The museum's run by a board of trustees and managed by Jan and Bob Saunders, who, like Guy, are both volunteers. The museum began as the collection of the late Peter Edwards, who by all accounts was a bit of a magpie. It sports a pair of 70-year-old film projectors that use burning carbon rods, a working 1950s radio station, and a vault filled to the nipples with 16 and 35mm film.
Well, we had a lady called in here from Auckland, and her great-grandfather had a film at Tangi Moana, and she come in and she said, thought we may have had it. And so I said, oh yeah, so we had a look through and we found one, and we played it, and it was back in about the 1930s at Himatangi, at Tangi Moana. All the boats, and in those days the estuary was full of boats and people, it was a picnic. You don't see it now. The upshot of it was she didn't quite find what she wanted. Anyway, a couple of years later on, I found the film that she was looking for. I've actually found it, but now I've lost track of it.
Bob and Jan have been with the museum for the last 13 years. They're now preparing to step down and take back their weekends.
Now we just want a bit of time up for ourselves to sort of enjoy our retirement and maybe do a bit of caravanning.
Unfortunately, this leaves the future of the museum in some doubt.
This place needs volunteers. You say everywhere you go, people are looking for volunteers. But, when we sort of move on, this place has got no one to carry it on.
There's some precious heritage here, treasures that will simply be consigned to the dust should this place close its doors.
There's a lot been said about the special analogue quality of valves, of film and of tape. In fact, there's been so much said about it that it feels a little bit redundant for me to wax lyrical about it. Instead, sometimes it's just better to watch and to listen.
what a lovely way for me to say that's our show for this week. Thanks to our guests, Rick Shearer, Michael Carney and Deborah Hill-Cohn. And thanks to you for watching. We'll be back with Media7 at the same time next week. Until then, goodbye.